Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode. Um, Thank you for joining us, first of all. If you are joining us from AD Plus, LinkedIn, YouTube, or Facebook, thank you so much for being here. Do not forget to follow me on YouTube and LinkedIn so you don't forget or you don't miss any of the episodes. Today's going to be pretty fun. I'm super excited. I got the chance to meet Myron. I think maybe last year, I think so. Back, if you haven't used Launch Club, I love how easy it is to use and how it's going to connect you with different people that you wouldn't get the chance to meet if it wasn't because of Launch Club. And I think we started talking, and he's been always really honestly helpful and willing to share his knowledge. So when this year I decided to start bringing more people from different aspects of how they interact with UX, he came to mind right away. So let's bring him in so he can tell us about himself. Hey, how's it going? How are you?
It's going so well. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited.
Yay!
I hope I can live up to the "this is going to be fun,"
Yes, I think so.
pressure. But yeah. So about me, I'm Myron. I've been leading design and engineering, and most specifically product teams for a really long time, nearly 20 years. Don't want to date myself too much. But I came up through design originally. I started as what was called a digital designer at the time, and it was like a hybrid design slash development role. And through that came up somewhat through like the nascent UX that we have now into a product role. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun to talk about the path to product through design and UX, and some of the things that I've observed in ways that we can
Yeah, definitely. And I feel for me, and a lot of people that I talk with that are new to UX design is how do I work with product designers? Like, what is the relationship? But before we go into that's where we came for. Why don't you tell us something interesting, unique, or fun about you?
Geez, it's tough. I guess as it relates to my kind of career progression, one of the things that was interesting about me, where I actually was able to like really learn a lot trial by fire, was uh, early on in my career. I was leading a team of designers and developers. I had no idea what I was doing. I was very young, but we were all, very eager to face the challenges. And actually, because I had a side project going, I accidentally started up a business in the mobile space with someone that I had met randomly online, very similar to how you and I had met in a developer forum, and actually had a very successful, relatively small but successful startup in the mobile space that forced me to go from having this very myopic view to all of a sudden owning products in a more meaningful way. And it was totally accidental. It was one of those serendipitous things that happened, and got to make around 40 different apps and games for a now defunct mobile platform. But it was super fun. But
See, there is already some fun happening.
I mean, I guess it's not as fun as like I'm the world champion roller coaster rider or anything like that.
I wouldn't have that as a fun fact. You should see me every time that I go to a roller coaster. I scream so much. It's painful. I mean, it's painful for me, but I know a lot of people around me always have fun. But okay, I know that you told us a little bit. How did you ended up in design? But how did you become a product manager? Like, why did you ended up doing this?
Yeah. So a lot of it came from, geez, there are a number of factors that went into it. Number one, I went to school for design. I started my career as a designer, but I hate every bit of design that actually I produce. So I love design. I love designers. I hate my own design so much, but I love being involved in solving the same kind of problems that design solves. And especially from a UX perspective, the things that are interesting about the, you know, the work that goes into solving complex user issues and to make a product really interesting and engaging and delightful, those are still present on a product side, although it has some different aspects to it that I think we'll dig into a little bit later that were really, really attractive to me. And some of it, like I was saying, was just kind of serendipitous when all of a sudden you have products that you're responsible for, that you're tracking things beyond just, hey, is this aesthetically pleasing? Is this solving a problem with customer friction? Are we like increasing clarity? Are we reducing like all of these things that you'd be thinking about from a UX perspective? And you start thinking about, well, is this something that's actually making money? Is this solving a bigger problem out in the world? That's where product starts to kind of differentiate itself a little bit. And that was really, really interesting to me. So initially it was, hey, I've got a business now. I'm responsible for actually making things that people are going to want to buy. We still have all of this burden of all of these design and UX matters, but now I need to worry about how we actually do some of the marketing pieces and understand the problems that users have and like really go out there and build something that's a little bit more well-rounded. And then when I came out of my startup and went back into things, really, I think that approaching it from that same kind of mindset, but in the B2B world or in like SaaS products instead of just looking at mobile applications, not to diminish mobile applications, but that kind of mindset was really, really helpful. And that's where I discovered, this is where my passion and my love is the most. I've been doing this for a long time, but the design, the marketing, the engineering pieces, there are people whose heart is way more in that, who are more talented than I am, who don't have the same problems with like, imposter syndrome or self-hate that I do as it relates to my design work. So that's really what it came down to. Initially the design plus development and leading those teams, but then having to understand, hey, there's a business aspect to this that we need to think about as well, and not just being like a voice for users or an advocate for, the most aesthetically pleasing if you're looking at just pure like graphic or visual design.
Yeah, really nice. I think something that at least myself I always kind of got confused with, and I don't know where is the line, is what is a product manager? Yeah, sometimes it's like a project manager. Like there are so many things that
Sure.
It sounds like it. So what does a project manager do?
Yeah, so a product manager versus a project manager or a program manager, they're complementary roles, but they aren't the same role. Now, there might be organizations that are very small, startups, where you have to wear a ton of hats, where product manager and a product owner role and a program or project management role might all come together. But the goal of a product manager is, hey, we need to make sure that we are solving the right problems for the right people. We have the right population. We understand what the market in the industry looks like, and we're building things that will actually make money for the business, or will somehow generate revenue, or if it's have some sort of impact if it's an organization that's not as worried about actually generating money, like a nonprofit or social impact business. Whereas a program manager or a project manager are responsible for, hey, what is the time and cost and materials? Like how can we sequence these things and work through the dependencies so that we're actually getting things done? It is a far more like turn the knobs, make sure that things are working well, running the machine sort of role versus a, hey, where do we actually want to drive the machine to? It's more of a navigator role from the product management side. A lot of people describe product management, and it's kind of like fallen out of favor a lot for a number of reasons, as the CEO of the product. Which one reason it's fallen out of favor, which is really true, is product managers generally don't have direct reports. They don't have influence over a design team or an engineering team. So they have to lead by building really great relationships and having influence. And a CEO can just say, like, you're fired, get out of here. Like they have the ability to actually do that piece. So it really is more of this relationship building role where you have to translate the needs of the market and users and customers and balance that against the needs of the business and the internal stakeholders, and then bring that through and have this context and help the people who are actually doing the work, the designers and the engineers, et cetera, to have empathy for what these problems are. So we'll bring in the problem space, we'll bring in like some amount of user and market information, and hopefully disseminate it in such a way that designers and developers are able to do their best work. And a lot of that comes down to, really building trust and proving that you're a partner as opposed to, a dictator or someone who's just like.
Makes sense. Yeah. No, and I think Diana Marcela, I'm using here my Spanish. I was sharing just what you just said. I think project manager is more about allocating. Project manager is more about allocating resources and time management. So yes, exactly what you said. So thank you for sharing, Diana Marcela. Okay, I know that you share a little bit about what you do already, but if you can give us kind of I don't know, like more clarity about the responsibilities, what will you say?
Sure. It depends on the organization, because I think that very similar to UX, if someone says, hey, I want you to define what a UX ... does. Well, you could be a UX writer, you could be a UX researcher, you could be doing interaction design, you could be doing like a host of things, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you do all of them. But if you're in an organization of a certain size, or they haven't like heavily invested in UX as a discipline internally, maybe you are doing all of those things, or maybe you want to do all of those things, but you don't have the time and resources to do them all. With product, it really comes to, hey, I'm going to be managing the technical side of the puzzle, not from an implementation perspective, but also the relationship side of the puzzle from cradle to grave, or from inception to sunset, I guess is a nicer way to put it, for a product. So from, hey, we've got an idea, we feel that there's an unmet need out in the market, we need to actually ensure that this is something that people actually feel is a pain, that it's severe enough that they're willing to pay for it, that there are enough people out there that are interested in this, that we can actually build a business out of this product. What are competitors doing? What are other things that are competitors just in the mind space for them? Are people right now solving this in a completely different way? Is this I want to get from place A to place B, and I'll take a taxi or a shuttle or a carpool with a buddy, or I'll hitchhike, in that Uber universe sort of story, where there aren't direct competitors. And then going through and understanding, hey, how do we actually position this? How do we actually reach these audiences? How do we actually go through and categorize the different segments? How do we actually get this ready for launch? And then post-launch, how do we support this? How do we continue to maintain it? How do we get it to the end? So there is commonly referred to kind of like triangle between engineering, design, and product, which says like, hey, design is responsible for the desirability of the product. The engineering team is responsible for the feasibility of the product, and product is responsible for the viability. So from that, like, can we make it something that people are delighted to use, that they love to look at, that is fun, that like is solving this problem in a way that is like, going to evoke emotions and bring them back and what have you. On the design side, on the feasibility side, can we build this thing at all? Is it possible for us to build, a holographic moon base, or whatever this thing is that some crazy product person came, or an executive came and said, hey, we need to build this. And then product is responsible for, hey, can we actually make a business out of this? Can we connect this and get this in the hands of customers and actually build enough of a universe around this product that we're going to make something that's going to be sustainable? And that relationship, that partnership is really important and carries through the entire way. But all of the the pieces of, hey, now that we understand what we've got, like the pieces where you're actually going to be working with design and engineering are going to be, how do we break this down and sequence this work in such a way that we're tackling what we think are the biggest problems, and we're able to have hypotheses around those and actually track and measure whether or not we're doing the right things. So there's going to be, road mapping and backlog management, et cetera, that are going to come into play there. But really it is like, hey, how do we ensure that this product is the right product? And then how do we work with those teams that are building it to make sure that they have the information they need to do their best job to get things out to the users that are right?
Yeah, no, I love it. And I think the next question, and I think it has to do a little bit about my work too. Mostly because when I started to work, we have, my branch is called Journey Labs. So of course, our product owner is a journey owner. And I think at the beginning, I thought, okay, so our product owner is going to be our product manager kind of idea. And then as we go along, and I start talking with people in different teams, it's like, oh, our product owner doesn't look like he's our product manager. So what is then the differentiation between these two?
Yeah. So again, this is one where I'm speaking in broad generalities, and this is different everywhere. But the terminology for product owner kind of came out of the Agile universe with Scrum. It's not something that's different from product manager. It is a product management role that tends to be more focused on the tactical needs of the team to execute, as opposed to some of these bigger strategic, like higher level initiative pieces that a traditional product manager would be doing, especially if you've got a place where there is product management and product owners are defined roles within the organization, and they aren't done by the same person. But that's not to say that they're at odds with each other or that they are like different. The job is still product management. So the goal of a product owner is, how do I help this team to build the right thing so that we're optimizing our product for our audience? Which sounds an awful lot like what product managers do. It's just the time scale is often different, and it's going to be like more closely embedded to the team. So I guess I would ask, what aren't you getting from your product owner that you feel like you should? Because oftentimes they might not have the same external access. They might not be as worried about, hey, I need to have really great, competitive information, or I need to be worried about like having my finger on the pulse of industry movement, or maybe they aren't talking to customers directly as often. But it's still a product management job. It's just slightly different in how it's been, how they delineate some of that work.
No, and definitely what you were saying, this will change and different organizations and companies, and that mine is example of that. Yes, I think our product owner is really close to the organization, and they know so much about that. That's what they are in that position compared to the product manager. Now we are bringing product managers into the teams, and that will be kind of a liaison between now the four of them. Yeah.
Makes sense.
So if you could give like best practices or tips on how to be a product manager, what would you say?
Geez, there is a lot, and I feel like it's part of the reason I'm here. I think that there is a lot of kind of like dark arts mysticism wrapped around what product management is. And again, it comes down to, hey, is there a problem out there that needs to be solved for people where, there is a business opportunity that's big enough for us to do something about it? And like, can we advocate for the customer and solve that pain and do all these things? So I'm like retreading this ground. But the things that I see that are, potentially anti-patterns or that are missing are, some of it I think is kind of Steve Jobs effect stuff. Like everybody thinks that they know everything. And a big problem that I see, and this is present in a lot of organizations where they've got that kind of product ownership type of role, whether it's called that or not, where everybody stays inside of the building and their exposure to customers is through customer success or support or through sales or through an executive team. So the first thing, and this isn't, this isn't rocket science, and I'm not even coming up with this, but the first thing is you have to actually get your answers directly from users and customers and get out from within the organization and stop just going by gut feel and start actually connecting directly with customers. So if that's not happening, then I think that like foundationally, you're doing a disservice to yourself as a product manager, because talking directly with customers and getting a signal directly from them is very, very important. Now, there's another piece of that I would go even further, which is to say, if you are talking only to happy customers, or you're talking only to customers that come to you through customer success who are upset, you're still going to be in an echo chamber of people who know and use your product. So going beyond that to people who are also in that same universe as your customers or prospects, or being able to engage with sales team in such a way that you're actually able to directly talk to those prospects and understand what those needs are, is also critically important, because salespeople are incentivized to make sales. So if you don't, as a product person, come in and say and understand the problem, sales eventually is going to say, yes, we're going to build that, because you painted them into a corner and yourself into a corner, and you're going to be on the hook to build something that you don't fully understand. So talk to customers, talk to prospects. I would say that that's first. The second piece is there are a lot of things that you can get information around and you can actually validate with data. So it's critically important to actually be able to leverage the data in a meaningful way and use the data to be able to tell stories that aren't just these kind of like superficial, they call them vanity metrics, like things that are actually driving business or user outcomes in a meaningful way, as opposed to things that are going to tell a misleading story. So there are tons of tools that exist out there that are going to tell you things. That's not the best practice. The best practice is, before you build the thing, have an idea, a hypothesis, a target that you want to hit, that you've defined, that you're going to be able to actually use those tools and those metrics to measure against, to know whether or not you got there. Because it's really easy, once you've got all these tools in place, to lie to yourself even with the data and say, like, we did a great job, we made a change, and now we've got 100,000 more visits to X, or we've got more time here, or whatever it happens to be. But if your hypothesis was, hey, this is going to reduce time spent on this step, and we think it'll do it by 50%, or it'll do it by a full minute, whatever it happens to be, those number of visits have nothing to do with that. You're like trying to falsely correlate these things that are wildly off. So being able to say, and this comes right from like that lean UX benefit hypothesis, right? We think that by doing this, we think it'll have this benefit, and we'll know when we see this outcome. And that's critically important even in product management. Like, we'll know when we see this outcome. Another thing I would say as a best practice is, I was talking about product management sitting at the nexus between all these roles and having this like healthy dynamic tension between being an advocate for users and being like this advocate for the business, and trying to balance that. But you have to bring that context through to the people that might not directly be part of these conversations or intimately know the users or even the internal business stakeholders. So when you're defining what initiatives look like, or writing stories, even if it's getting to that level, a big shortcut that I see that people take is, for this type of user, they want to do this. And the last piece that is really the outcome that you want to see, either business outcome or user outcome, like the actual why, is left out, and it's not fully fleshed out. So people will build things, and you start to get what I like to call these like Alice in Wonderland kind of through the looking glass features, where you're like, geez, it is the thing I asked for, but it's just a little bit off. And an example I like to give is, if you tell someone, hey, I need to have something that moves me from point A to point B, and design does an amazing job, and the thing that comes back to you is a Ferrari. Number one, you haven't involved yourself in the process early enough to know that's what you're building. But it's entirely possible that, the thing that you want is a boat, because the Ferrari is not going to go over the water, or a rocket ship, or even worse, they're like, hey, I want to move from point A to point B, but I need to move a couch. And I would always get really angry when I would like, why are you trying to use my Ferrari to move a couch, when I'm talking about features that people were kind of ruining. Like it's because they hadn't fully understood, or they didn't fully give the context. So I think that's really critically important. Yeah, I'll kind of leave it there, but I think foundationally, and this goes for any role at any team, like there is a trust component that is foundational for any of these relationships, and a lot of that is built by being able to like provide that clarity and give people what they need to do their job well. Because ultimately, if you come back and you put in all this hard work on something as a designer or an engineer or anybody, and someone comes at the last minute and they tell you you've done a bad job for something that's been completely out of your control, it doesn't matter that it's out of your control. You're still going to feel bad about it. And now everybody is behind, and everybody has bad feelings, and it's something that could have been solved up front just by spending a little bit of extra time defining, like, here's who we're building for, and here's why, and here's the business reason that we're doing this. Here's how like this became a priority, because everybody wants to do the right thing, ultimately, is my belief.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think you were talking a little bit about the relationship and having trust. I think this is now where all the designers, we want some answers. Yes, like,
Yeah.
How can a designer work effectively for product like managers? Like, what we should be doing to make our relationship better?
Yeah, I think that as a designer, one thing that I would encourage, and this one's tough because it's going to be 100% based on whether or not you're working with a product manager that also is an armchair designer, right? Like they're like, hey, I'm going to try and influence this design a lot. But ultimately, whether you're a designer inside of an organization or working for external clients, you're going to have to deal with some of this. But my first recommendation would be set expectations appropriately about what things are going to look like across the stages of the design, and bring people in as early as you possibly can, like when it feels uncomfortable to do so, to make sure that you're going in the right direction. Because ultimately, and again, this isn't how it works in the real world, like, but in a perfect universe, maybe, ultimately the product manager is not responsible for actually creating the solution. They're responsible for vetting and validating and defining the problem, and then shepherding the solution through with the help of the people who actually are best equipped to solve it. So those designers and those engineers. And that's why you have to provide that context. But as a designer, if you wait until you've got a car and they need a boat, you waited too long. So it's okay to show early, but just make sure that you're managing the expectations and saying like, hey, I'm going to show you things. They're going to be really early. Like, I'm showing you just to make sure it's on the right track. Like, I'm still vulnerable right now. So like, if it's on the right track, wait until I've had some time to tune it a little bit more before you start telling me to, change the colors or move buttons around or what have you. I think that's really, really helpful. Another thing is, if you actually are able to build that relationship and have good candor and like give feedback that is going to be open and honest, and people take it as feedback around growth and not you trying to attack them personally, I would try and make sure that you're actually getting the right amount of clarity from things, so that, like, it's okay to push back and say like, hey, I don't fully understand this, and to do it to the point where, you could be, even playing dumb a little bit, just to make sure that you are not assuming things, to make sure that it's fully rounded and fully understood. So I would say that those are two two like quick and easy pieces. The other piece is especially for like really data driven and like experiment centric UX teams, or UX research teams that have built their own personas. I would say being able to share and work on those things collaboratively is really, really helpful tool for being able to build trust and kind of show value from that team, because there are things you're going to see out of there that are really, really exciting. And data that tells a good story is, like a very addictive and tasty little candy for product managers. So if you're like, hey, like this is something interesting that we found, like look at this, as the user is going through their journey in the application, like something interesting happens here, and we think that this is what's going on. Like, oh, that's great, and that's amazing. So those are just a couple of things. They aren't really super tactical, but hopefully it's useful.
Yeah, no, let's say, what about, because this sounds like we have worked together for a while, yes? Mm-hmm. What about, today's my first day at work, and I'm the new designer in the company. Like, how should I approach a product manager? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, if you, like, product managers and UX designers and even visual designers, they're on the same team. Like they both still own that component of, like, we're here to fight for what the user, what the customer needs. Their happiness and their success is ultimately our goal, and that our success is tied up in theirs. So, understanding that you at first are on the same team is critically important. But if you're coming in brand new, I hope that the company would have some good onboarding to help you understand. But if not, it would be good to understand, hey, how did this product come to be? Like, help me understand who the customers are, help me understand some of the things that might not be an internal asset inside of design. Help me understand your role. And then something that I think is just a good question to ask when you're meeting people in general is, like, what's a great example of a process or an artifact or something that's worked really well here, and what's something that we could actually do to improve, X, Y, or Z thing. So understanding, hey, how do products get built? How do they get designed? Like, how do we get to where we are? What is your role? How are you successful? What makes me successful when working with you? What are the best examples of these things? Those all, I think, are good ways to approach it. And then, like, even like, what might surprise me about working here as a designer in this role, or what do we do here differently from other organizations? What makes design important to you as a product manager? What are the things that I should be doing? Because too, there are going to be potential biases, and you could have product managers that are very inside the organization, that are very technical, that might not value UX a lot. It might just be like, hey, we need things to be done very quickly. In your success trying to be this user advocate within that type of organization might not be as appreciated with someone like that as it would with someone who is actually more externally facing, who values design and UX differently. So it's good to know before you go in and say, like, hey, I want to do this, like, very hands-on study with all these users and do this. It might you might want to wait until you've earned more trust before you go and do something like that.
Oh, and I think what you just mentioned is something that a lot of people maybe will go through, or they always is like, what do I do? What do I do if my product manager do not believe in, I mean, they should, but what about if they don't believe in what we do? Like, how do we approach this, and how we can make sure that at the end of the day, we are a team building to make the user's experience better?
Yeah, I would say that, and this happens even when you're talking about, as a product manager, I've definitely gone and said, hey, here's something that's really, really critical that we build. I might be advocating for the engineering team because they said, hey, we've got like a ton of risk here. We've got this old infrastructure that was built very quickly when we're in startup mode, and now it's not going to scale and it's going to turn over. Or it might be, hey, we've got like this UX problem where a not not many of our user base finds it right now, but as we begin to grow our product, this becomes a huge risk. And it becomes a, an us versus them kind of scenario where it's all about emotion, right? And sometimes it even happens the other way, where someone says, like, hey, we have to build this thing. It's this ultimate shiny object. I'm super excited about it. And everybody else is like, well, that's kind of that doesn't make sense. It's a weird thing. Where'd that come out of? So the answer, my long-winded way of getting to it, is if there's a way to actually build incremental tests, or to actually show with data that something is important and has an impact, that would be the best way to go about doing it. You're not going to be able to fight emotion with emotion. You have to remove people from that state where they're saying I think, I feel, and get them into okay, I see, I understand. Here's some data that shows that by making this change, we're going to be able to do this thing. And that's where it becomes really important to have some of those experiments and start to build that rigor in, or to have things instrumented with analytics and things that are showing telemetry within your product. Because sometimes you may be going and gearing up for a fight, and then you'll go and look at the data and be like, oh my gosh, okay, I am gonna make the logo bigger. I am gonna make the button, red or green or whatever, because this does seem to actually bear out in our user base. But yeah, the goal would be, as much as possible, show, don't tell. Actually prove that this is making a difference. If you're dealing with people who don't see the value, begin to tell the story of the value as much as possible, empirically and with data, if you can. If not, bite your lip and work on your resume. I mean, I think that in this day and age, if you're in an organization where they really devalue UX and design, they've probably been asleep for the last 15 years. Or it's internal tools in a huge enterprise where they've been asleep for the last 50. So,
I know, I think that's such a valuable too, yes, because sometimes we stay in places, and I mean, it's like any relationship, yes, you just get comfortable. It's let's stay here because there's nothing better outside. But I feel like knowing exactly that you can find a place where your work and what you do will be valuable is important. Yeah. Okay, so we have a couple of questions, but I feel like, and again, this is more like a personal question. As I shared with you, I studied a product manager course not long ago, and is when do a UX designer moves into product manager, and how can a designer can do it?
Yeah, well, it's funny because there isn't. Well, I'm going to say there isn't. There wasn't. Now there is. But there wasn't a formal, hey, this is how you become a product manager when I started. And even, in many of my roles, I wasn't even called product manager. It was some other, thing, or jumble of things. But the road to product manager was often very similar to the road to team lead or manager for other people. It's just hey, nobody's doing this. And there's actually an adage that comes out of, I think it's Pragmatic Institute. They're one of the ones that they're an old school product training organization. They've been around for a while. If product doesn't do their job, someone else or another team will. So people coming up from UX into product, or people coming up from engineering into product, was the natural progression of things, or even from project management, or being some other leader. It's the people that care about the users that also care about the team building the right thing, and get sick of building things that aren't well received, or seeing the business being mismanaged. So the difference between UX and product really is, hey, you want to deeply understand the customer, you want to go out there and build relationships with users, you want to build things that are actually going to excite them and solve problems for them. Okay, now let's put on our business hat. and make sure that we're actually looking at it through the lens of like, is this, increasing retention and reducing churn and increasing revenue? There's some UX interesting things when you look at things like product-led growth, like can we really reduce the time between the first time they interact with our product and the first time they have like a really great success and get value out of our product? And can we make it so that it's easier for them to share and expand and build? It's not that different of a mindset, but it is a lot more that you have to do, and you have to do it from further away from the actual execution. So if you love doing the things that are around building the solution, then you're probably not going to be as happy as a product manager as you are in a UX or a visual design role, because you're going to move further away from that. But the same is true if you move up in your career as a people manager as well. So, if you're looking at someone who comes in as a designer, and then you look at someone who is a director of design, or a VP of design, the work that they're doing that's actually design work is going to get less and less as you go up that hierarchy. Same is true with engineers. Like a CTO is generally not writing production code that's going out to users. So moving over into product might be fine for where you're at, understanding that, hey, I'm going to be doing more of the problem and user and kind of product definition outside of the actual execution piece. I still get to, kind of make my wish list of what problems I think should be solved, but I have to trust in the team to actually solve them without just dictating out too much what those solutions look like. So where do you go from being someone who is UX to that? I would say, like, what you're doing is not wrong. Going through and taking some formal schooling is not the wrong thing. But getting involved in product communities or looking at the literature, I think that some of the things that make good sense from a, from a, hey, here's something that I should have as a tool in my toolbox perspective, are understanding what the metrics are that drive the type of business you're in, whether it's an app or a SaaS business or something else. Like, what are the metrics that actually keep this business afloat, that are related to the things that I can do and the levers I can pull as a UX, and start to immerse yourself more in those and to understand those metrics in your day-to-day work. Also understanding, hey, how can we actually prioritize and sequence like large initiatives based on data that we can get in? So looking at what data is available that you've got for you and thinking about, okay, all things being equal, how would I prioritize this? And now adding in like the amount of resources that it would take, or the other things, like being able to prioritize work is a big foundational piece of things as well. So I don't know. Feel free to push back if I'm not giving you a good answer. Like, is there anything specifically that
No, I think totally makes sense, and I feel for me at least that's really important, how the data and how to start really digging into how to utilize it, where to get it. As a designer, we don't do that much at the moment. And I think when you were saying, oh, you will stay away a little bit of solutioning, I think sometimes that's the fun part. And going away of that is kind of scary, but yes.
Yeah, so it's different, right? I love product. I love the craft of product. I love just about everything about it. And it's not that you don't get to participate in the solution being built. It's that you are more cheerleader and less, you're less out there actually throwing the ball around. So the, you're still a part of it. You could say that you're a quarterback or a coach, but it's not true. Like, the people who are actually out there taking the hits should be the people who are like, have spent their life and are passionate about design and engineering, and you're able to provide a structure for which they're able to be successful by saying, like, here are the things we need to solve. This is the work that needs to get done. Here's when we'll think we've done a good job. And a lot of times you still, having UX skills and design skills are an amazing resource. Like some of my favorite product managers that I work with also come from a design or a UX background, and they have tools to be able to do things like tell stories and to be able to communicate that are really, really valuable, and also to be able to do like fat marker sketches and to bridge the gap to make some of these processes shorter is valuable. But it's just, in the end, it's not going to be your pixels. It'll be our pixels, right? It'll be something that someone else had put together. But I think that product skills are valuable for any role, even if you're not doing it. If for no other reason, to be able to push back against bad product management, which there's a lot of. Like, you should know and have an expectation of, like, this is what good looks like for product. Like, I understand what my job is as an engineer on this specific project, or as a UX, or as a copywriter, or potentially as a marketer, or whoever. Like, I understand what I need to do to make the user successful and for me to be successful in doing so. And I know how we're going to measure that, and I know why we're doing it, and I know why we're doing it versus this other thing. So that's where, it'll be helpful, just so you can say.
Perfect. Yes, definitely. No, we have so many questions and they keep coming in. Okay. So let's see. Let's see. And hi, Luigi. He always comes to watch me, so thank you so much. And he always have great questions. So let's see. Okay. So again, Diana Marcela, they're asking, how do you prioritize features building and how you communicate that to design?
Yeah. So, the way I do it isn't the way that everybody does it. There are a ton of frameworks out there for actually prioritizing how features get built. And again, like, gosh, I'm gonna mangle this quote, but all models are wrong. Some models are useful, right? So, like, they don't all work all the time, but it's good to have something that actually makes sense. So there are frameworks out there like Rice or Kano or what have you, that you can actually plug in certain metrics and dimensions of what's important to you or your business, and actually use that to determine what is a priority. So the way I generally do it is I use what's called a weighted score matrix, where you say, hey, here are things that are important to us in the business, and then you put some sort of weighting on it, and then you score the different features that you're working on across it. I generally like to include in mine something that's related to, like, this notional strategic value, which really means, like, the CEO is yelling for it. So you can put something in there where you're like, oh, I'm going to give that a 10. And then if it still doesn't bubble to the top, even with the CEO screaming for it or whoever, then it becomes a conversation that you need to have, where you have to actually button up your shirt and stand up tall and go in and be like, hey, listen, here's where we've put this, and here's where it actually falls in the rank of priorities with everything else. We don't think that this is as important as these other things, because these are really critical to our users and our business, or to keeping our product actually up and running. And it's useful once you can actually have a trusted system, whatever it is, in place, because then it doesn't become this question of, like, why are they prioritizing this there? The system really helps with that. Again, it removes that, like, I think I'm the smartest and I'm going to tell you from the equation. It's actually like, well, when we put it in the system, maybe they're juicing the numbers a little bit here and there, but ultimately you should be able to get an idea of why. But also it comes down to, like, hey, you should be able to understand the context, at least of the problem that's being solved, the feature that's being built, actually in the spec or the brief or the stories itself, so that it's actually been communicated through, like, hey, this is why it's a priority. And sometimes, even with all of that, your hands get tied, and it'll be like, hey, this isn't the most important thing, but the ink is dry on the contract. We've got this deal with these partners, and we have to do it because it's an important logo or an important relationship, and we understand that we're going to sacrifice doing all of these things.
No, it makes totally sense. Okay, so we have the one for Nancy. So, regarding best practices to resolve conflict that arise between PM, aside, and design. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, this is one where they both should be advocating for the users. Like, the hope is that product is actually still immersed in the needs of the users and is still actually, out there talking to them and understanding them and prospects and the market more broadly in the industry. So if they're advocating purely from a business side, there might not be a lot that you can do, because in my mind, they're probably not being as effective as a product leader as they should be, because it's a tension. Like, if you say, hey, this is the best thing for the users, and they say, I don't care, it's a red flag. If you say, hey, this is the best thing for the users, and they say, I know, I wish we could do it, but the reality is, like, we need to sacrifice all of these things because we need to be able to execute on this other thing that is really, really important for us from a business perspective. Like, let's think and solve this together so that we can try and get as close to the best of both worlds. Then that would be, I think, more in line. But the answer is, I think if you're looking to be able to actually show value and prove things, if you've got the tooling, try and do it by actually proving it. Like, hey, here's something that we've done. Here's in the past how we've actually shown that doing this type of work or this type of thing is valuable for our users. And if you can begin to at least draw some kind of directional line to how it actually makes life better for them, or makes the company better. But they should be always in this, like the tension between, I want to do what's best for the users, but we have to do it and still make money for the company. And I want the engineers to feel good, and I want the designers to feel good. I want the internal stakeholders to feel good. Like, it is a political play. If you've got product people who are being dictatorial and you aren't just being like a passionate artist, like, if you aren't falling in love with your work, then, I don't know. It should work out, is my hope.
Yeah, well, I think this, I thought that Charles' code will be a good one to put here. Bad PM, micromanaging, designing, and the design. And I think this is a little bit what you were talking about.
Yeah, and really, it's not a great answer, because if you get that where they are coming in and they're saying, like, hey, it needs to be exactly like this, and sometimes it might need to be exactly like that. But if it needs to be exactly like that and they aren't providing you the context for why, if they're like, hey, it needs to be exactly like this, and you're like, well, that's ugly. And they're like, it needs to be exactly like this because of a specific audience that requires it to be like that. It's either cultural, or it's an accessibility issue, or it's something else. Like, if you don't have that information, then they haven't completely done their job, and they should be able to provide that information. Mm-hmm. But if it has to be exactly like this because I said so, there's not much you're going to be able to do to be able to, like, fix that. And maybe there is, but I'm not a good enough behavioral psychologist to,
yes. So. Makes sense. Okay, so here one from Luigi. As a product manager, do you use heuristic analysis in testing a product?
Yeah, I think that I would hope as a UX and as a product manager, you try and do as much analysis and apply as many, like, thoughtful heuristics as possible to be able to actually, like, prove out what it is that you're doing, to be able to. Here, I'm going to take a step back. Like, as much as possible, I'm advocating for taking as small a bite as possible and having it wrapped in a, hey, this is what we think this will do, and we're going to ship this value, and we're going to be able to test it, and we're going to be able to see in very small cycles whether or not things are working. So yes, like, you should be doing that across everything, and then you should be able to apply these rules more broadly to help inform what type of things you're going to build and the approach that you're going to take. So the things that you measure vary between the teams, but whether it's you're trying to increase the rate of conversion or whatever it is you're trying to do, it may be different, but I think that analysis in general and being able to understand what it is you're doing and where you're going is critical everywhere. And when it comes to actually testing through and proving out value, whether it is, hey, we're going to test this out from like an acceptance testing perspective, or to make sure that it's actually ready for production, or in front of a live audience, like, gosh, yeah, every facet of everything is critical to break down as small as possible and test as early as possible, so that you don't waste time delivering the wrong thing. So
Yeah.
I hope I answered that correctly.
Yeah, I think Luigi was saying thank you. Yeah, so I think this is a one that everybody kind of always have in mind. Yes, like, what do you do if you want to connect with users, but your budget is restrained and small? Like, what do you do to find this information?
Yeah, I mean, geez, it was easier 3 years ago, right, when kind of pre-pandemic, but post-pandemic, there are a number of ways that you can do it, and you probably, depending on the organization, just going rogue and doing it yourself without letting people know, especially if you're showing yourself as a representative of the organization, might not be the best way to do it. But meetups that might have target users in them, Slack groups, online groups. If you're within an organization and you're like, hey, we want to reach out to people directly and do it cheaply and cheerfully. Surveying, it's not my favorite because you don't get to ask forensic kind of like deep dive questions, but being able to send out surveys that ask questions that you're able to hopefully get to by having direct conversations. I mean, if you have people who are actually doing prospecting or who are doing sales, somebody is connecting with potential customers or users right now. So for the last company, last startup, like Botany, 200 odd potential customers and users, like, were direct customer interviews, either via Zoom or grabbing coffee or what have you, to be able to even understand what the questions were that we wanted to have for a survey, and understand like what the real problems were and how we wanted to solve them, and to position the product. So yeah, it shouldn't be super expensive to interact with your customers, unless you want to fly out face to face and there's like some other divide. But being able to say, hey, I'm not going to be able to write a cold outreach for you, but I'm really interested in what you do. Do you have, this isn't a sales pitch. I'm just, trying to solve problems. Do you have 5 minutes for me to be able to pick your brain? And hopefully they'll say yes, but.
Oh, you just try the next person. I feel like that's what will happen too.
Yeah. Or you hop on Lunch Club and like.
Yes, exactly. Definitely. Join Lunch Club. Okay, let's see. We are 57 minutes. Okay, so who is this? Okay. Would you be able to explain how to make incremental tests to gain data when deciding on a feature? It is a test on users or on the product?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, the short answer is yes. So if you're looking at something where it is, hey, we want to invest in this, and we haven't done any design or any work on it, it's just a bet, it's an idea that's come in, then the tests that you're going to do are going to probably be far more human. It's going to be like, is this something that is how big of a problem is this for you? You could go to a Kano type model, like, do you care that this is missing? Would you care if it was in the product, even if you don't care if it was missing? And you can begin to ask those types of questions up front before you even go into the build. Or you can do some like click prototypes, what have you, to be able to say like, hey, are we actually solutioning this in the right way? Is it solving a problem in the way that was expected? So if it's, do we want to invest in this at all? You can do some things up front to kind of de-risk it and to answer those questions. And some of them might just be conversations and surveys. Some of it might be, high fidelity or even low fidelity mock-ups or prototypes. On the flip side, though, sometimes you build something and you want to know if it's enough. You can oftentimes just look at telemetry and do some kind of temperature checks with people to say, hey, we built this feature. Do you know it's there? Have you used it? Is it solving your problem? do you need it to solve your problem more? Is it falling flat anywhere? And sometimes I've discovered, hey, what we've built is more than sufficient for the need to solve this problem. We don't have to invest in it anymore. Like everything else right now is going to be diminishing returns, so we can focus on actually re-resourcing to something that's going to be a net new, like big bet all over again. So yeah, but anything, if you know what the question is that you're asking up front, and you say like, hey, we feel that if this hits 100x, or we see an increase of 50% y, we'll feel like it's a good signal for us to go to the next phase. Then you're probably setting up these tests and experiments right.
Well, I think I had so much fun, and it was so much insightful, and I feel like we can keep talking about these forever because there's so much to ask. But thank you so much for taking the time. You did amazing.
This was fun.
Yeah, I told you from the beginning. And again, for all of you that are listening or watching, if you want to keep meeting people like Myron, keep showing up. I have one of these every single week. So Myron, for next week, we have Adam. He's going to tell us about the power of tension in a multidisciplinary team. So I feel like it's going to be a good one. And even if you speak Spanish, I'm going to have Spanish speakers too. So just keep coming. Don't forget to follow up and subscribe. So again, you don't keep missing people like Myron. And I think this is going to empower all people. I would say this is for UX designers, but anyone in the tech industry. So thank you, everybody. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Have a good one.
Bye.